Welcome to OsteAo, that's with a capital T-E-A. We're osteo warriors in treatment and recent survivors spill the tea on all things osteosarcoma and cancer from the adolescent and young adult patient perspective. Listen in on our honest and personal conversations about our osteo experiences, stories, and who knows what else. This podcast discusses all aspects of the young adult cancer experience in a conversational format. Audience discretion is advised. Make sure you like and follow MIB Agents on social media for all the intel and hot goss.
I was going to let you guys know that we have a Healing Hearts Wellness Workshop on 7/31 at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's open to parents and siblings, so if you're interested in that, just email Isabel at mibagents.org for more info.
I know Healing Hearts is a very popular program that we have going on, so definitely sign up if you are interested. So welcome back, everybody. We have a great episode today. We are going to be talking about the sibling situation as kind of our overall catchy title for today's episode. We have a wonderful guest here with us today, Dr. Kuo, talking about his experience in becoming an oncologist and his experience with the traumatic loss of not one but two siblings, one to osteo, and how that kind of shaped your professional life. So, and then we also have Matt and Valerie, who both had osteo siblings who have since passed away. But it is great to have us all here through this one uniting factor that is the osteosarcoma community. And I'm so glad to have you all here today. And let's start with what's the tea? No, like literally. So my throat hurts a little bit, and I was going to go down and make tea, but I was a little short on time. So I am drinking the most adult beverage of adult beverages, water. I will rate this massive bottle, even though it's not as environmentally friendly. I will be recycling it, don't worry. It is 1.75 liters. I may get through this by the end of the episode because I live by the motto hydrate or dihydrate, and I am trying to kick this cold. So hopefully that goes well. It was cooler in here overnight, which was nice. So it's a little less than room temperature, which I'm really appreciating right now. So I'm gonna give it, a solid 8 out of 10. I mean, water's always gonna be water, but it's hitting today. So yeah, Matt, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm kind of right there with you. I was going to go for green tea this morning. I like to have like green tea in the morning, but it's like really hot here right now. So I'm drinking some sparkling water, a little bit of Pellegrino. That's kind of fancy for me, but it's pretty good. I don't usually drink sparkling water, but when I do, it's nice. So I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. Very refreshing. Very refreshing.
Awesome. And what are you up to right now? Are you in school? Obviously, you just DJ'd Factor.
Yeah.
Um, so what
So
do you
I just graduated from school, philosophy major, the most, I
Nice.
guess, useless, useful major, at least in my goals here. I want to go to law school in a couple years, so I'll be
Great.
starting at a public defender's office, just doing like paralegal type work for the next couple years. I'm just living at home right now, relaxing, having my mom cook dinner for me. I don't have to do grocery shopping, which is very nice. So yeah, I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah, living at home
Yeah,
definitely has its perks for sure, and I greatly enjoy it
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
Valerie, darling, what are you up to? What are you drinking? I am so excited to see you and hear from you. I know it's been a while,
Yeah.
so give us the tea, update us.
Yeah, it was funny because actually when I was at Factor, I was looking at a girl from behind, and I swear I thought it was you. It was actually like another girl named like Sammy, because like she
Sammy is
also
also
has
from this
like,
area,
yeah,
so
so she
that
has like
also
curly hair, and I was like, oh my gosh, me. And then she turned around, and I was like, this is so embarrassing. I'm just gonna
she
like
texted
walk
me
away.
that you were not the only person who did that, apparently. So do not feel bad about that. I'm so sorry that I have to miss Factor this year. Um, Two of my friends who are from the UK, who I met on a cruise 10 years ago, came out for 10 days and I hadn't seen them in 5 years. So I was like, okay, I think I can go to Factor next year, but I don't know if they
Yeah.
can make this trip out again. But it sounded like a fantastic time. And so I'm sad that I missed it, but I will be there next year.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to that you'll be there. And also it was nice to meet Matt too, because I know we were all on the junior board together. So it feels like a virtual reunion. But I am drinking lemonade. I just like my lab just ordered lunch, so I'm glad I just like got to pick that up really quick before our
Nice.
osteo podcast. And so right now I graduated college 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and I'm working as a research associate at Duke University studying osteosarcoma.
That is amazing. Duke was on my list when I applied. Fantastic school. So happy for you, and so glad to see everyone back on again. So, Dr. Kuo, what are you sipping on today?
I'm drinking what they call like a cream top. It's like a whipped cream on top of cold brew. Which I need my cup of coffee every morning, and especially
Oh
this
yeah.
morning because my 10-month-old daughter decided to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and wanted
Oh,
breakfast.
I can only imagine. I mean, anytime anyone wakes me up at 4:30, I'm like, and so just give us a little brief description of what
Oh,
you do and why you're here today.
yeah, so like you were saying, I'm a physician scientist currently at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. I'm originally from Taiwan, so I was born in Los Angeles and actually was raised and grew up in Taiwan, and then came back out here for school. So I went to UCSD for college, took a couple years off, and then went to medical school at Rush, and then subsequently came back to LA to CHLA for basically the rest of my training in terms of pediatrics training, the pediatric oncology fellowship, and now I'm a physician scientist doing my postdoc at Dr. James Amatrita's lab, actually using zebrafish as a disease model organism, looking into Ewing sarcoma, which is another bone sarcoma as well. So
I am familiar with it, and actually, my bio teacher from high school, who has kind of been my mentor. I'm 25 now, and fortunately had to drop out of school for treatment reasons. And every time I go back, my cancer tends to flare up. So I'm a little
mm,
superstitious going back.
yeah.
But I may be starting a semester of a professional program at Syracuse, hopefully in the next year. It should just be a semester. So I'm very excited for that. So obviously, we are talking about the sibling experience today. I am an only child, so that is why I have these wonderful people here with me today to help share their side of the story and their perspective on sarcoma and life as a sibling. So my first question is to all of you, and Dr. Kuo, we can start with you. And so obviously you wrote that beautiful article, which with your permission we can share with our audience as well, the link to that in
Yeah.
either the bio of the YouTube episode that comes out or something like that. And we're really glad to have you here today. So I guess the biggest starting question is how does your siblings' diagnosis and treatment plan impact you today? Obviously, you have your career that is focusing on sarcomas. You're working with zebrafish, but how does it impact you both personally and professionally today?
Yeah, so first off, thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor, and also to sort of be part of the MIB community. I think um, I'm gonna just focus on Stanley. So when Stanley was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, this was already sort of a layer on top of me losing my eldest brother from a sort of a measles infection sequelae. So I lost Sammy, my eldest brother, when I was 17. And at that point, I sort of, whole experience sort of pushed me away from medicine because I felt like it wasn't something that I wanted to be in, just because of sort of the way that it affected my life when I was growing up. So I actually went to college at UCSD, like I mentioned, with a dance major, because I was just going to pursue like art, something super different, completely different than medicine. And then when I was about when I was 20 in 2009, Stanley was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, and that was when it was sort of a shock, and then was kind of like, oh no, I can't believe this is happening again. Um, and I was very hesitant about going into medicine at that time, but ultimately, when he passed away, he sort of made me promise him that I would one day make an impact in the field of osteosarcoma. So because of that promise, I just decided to give it a shot. And so I started taking some classes and got into it, and here I am. So I think because of Stanley, it sort of rerouted my career trajectory from a dancer into a doctor, I guess. And so now I'm a physician scientist, really because of him, and trying to make an impact for the sarcoma world, and especially osteosarcoma. And I think both Sammy and Stanley's experiences really made me a more like a more humanist, like, more human as a doctor, more compassionate, and also understanding what the families have to go through. It sort of added a different layer of perspective.
I mean, obviously that added perspective is, I mean, priceless. Unfortunately, it did have to come through various forms of trauma and love, which are always associated in my mind. I feel like some of the most traumatic events are tied in with love, and loved ones. So thank you for sharing that, and it's an honor to have you working in our community to make it better, which is what we are all trying to do in our own ways too, and to honor, those who have been taken by osteosarcoma. And it's just, thank you so much for being here and for giving that reassurance to the entire family, not just the patient, because I know in the article that you wrote and the piece that you wrote, you talked about how important it is to make the siblings feel seen. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. It's such an honor to have you here today. Matt, will bring you to the same question. How does your siblings' diagnosis and treatment plan still impact you today? And how has, the grief process also impacted your life?
Yeah, we're getting right into it with the deep ones. I think, you know, for me, I was 15 when my brother passed from osteo. I was 13, I believe he was 11 when he was first diagnosed. So for me, I feel like at that such a young age, I kind of had the initial reaction that Dr. Kuo had, where I, didn't really want to be involved in, medicine. I kind of was just so averse to it, just given like the situation. Um, but I think that one thing that really did stick with me was, just seeing all the people around my brother, and how they were contributing so much of their time and energy to helping him be comfortable, to trying to make him get better, trying to make him healthy. And I knew for me, I did have a period of time where I was like, this might be something that I would want to, pursue later in life. But I quickly realized when I got to college that mathematics, chemistry, biology was not really for me, very, very quickly. So I, ended up taking a lot of different classes, just trying to find what I really wanted my impact to be, especially just seeing my brother's experience as, like motivation for me to make some kind of impact, even if it's not in medicine, to just help people, be an advocate for people. And I think that's what led me down the path of, law and philosophy and ethics specifically. And that's where I really found my passion. And I think that today, as I, begin my job working alongside like public defenders and that kind of thing, I just keep in the forefront of my mind how big of an impact medical issues have on people going through the legal system. I think it's something that's overlooked a lot, and it's something that I really want to, bring to my work and make an emphasis on, how much that impacts people, lack of medical care, and how that can, just make people's situations so much worse. So I think that my experience with my brother's diagnosis has really just made me take into account how big of a role people's health plays in, you know, all outcomes of their life. And even if it's not specifically in the medical field that I'm working, how I can, you know, bring that perspective there.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. It definitely means a lot to me, and I know everyone who's in the Zoom right now and everyone listening. So thank you so much. It's great to know that we have so many supporters in our corner, and that we're kind of honoring the legacy of so many, and it's just so powerful. So really, thank you. Valerie, same question for you. I know that you are literally sitting in a lab right now at Duke. So I would love to hear how, you know, the diagnosis of your sibling and everything that has transpired since has kind of led you to where you are now.
Yeah, no, I want to echo what Dr. Kuo and like Matt says, because I know like initially it was like kind of a shock because like I think a lot of people think I'm sure it's like repeated over and over again that it's like the cute kid with bald heads. And so like if you're not really in it, like that's what people think it is, but it's a lot more like traumatic than I think meets the day-to-day human eye that you only know if you're in it. And so for the longest time, it was hard to like see other patients or like families because it's like I know what they're about to go through or have gone through. So I needed to separate for myself from it. But then I think what being a sibling has taught me is that like because like you do oftentimes live in the shadow of your sibling, it's like to learn to be a self advocate for how you feel and like get the support you need. So I think when my sister was going through treatment, what was really hard was like I think this might be cultural, but my family kind of like we never really expressed how we all felt. So I think we were all like kind of like walking on eggshells around each other. Like I'm sure my parents would cry and I would cry too, but it's like try to do it and like not in front of my sister. And so I felt like I became really good at masking my own emotions. But as I got older, I felt like it was like a safer space. So getting like the psychological support and the counseling really helped like on like an emotional aspect. And so I feel like as like a day-to-day human, it's made me more compassionate and like, you know, seeking out the lonely people or the people who like might not be like the center of attention like the kids who might be a little bit more quiet to include them on things. And now like I'm really involved in like childhood cancer advocacy still like whether it's attending Factor. In a couple weeks I'm actually volunteering at a camp for siblings of cancer patients, and it's like this 1 week residential camp where like they are the center of attention and not like having to be someone else's sibling. And my day-to-day work right now, I'm a research assistant at Duke, studying like chemo resistance and osteosarcoma, and I hope to apply to PhD programs to improve and push the needle forward in osteosarcoma, because I just felt like personally seeing the patients was like really hard for me emotionally, but I still wanted to make a difference, and I can do it by doing research and like the work behind the hood.
You know, that's really amazing, especially as someone who is treatment resistant. I was told 2.5 years ago that I am treatment, chemo, and immunotherapy resistant. Um, so, you know, just living with metastatic disease, knowing that there isn't anything that's currently on the market that's probably going to help me, it is so wonderful hearing how much effort is going into um, kind of working towards a better future for not only the patients, but obviously their families and supporters and caregivers and siblings and everyone who makes up the life of the community, essentially. So it really means a lot to me. Thank you so much. And um, you know, kind of going off of what you were saying is when I did go back to school, when I thought I was in the clear, I had switched to psych from pre-med. I was pre-med before cancer, and then of course it pushed me away. And I realized the need for psychiatric support for the entire family, for the entire support system, not just the patient. Um, so I really am hearing what you all are saying, and I obviously, since I'm an only child, I can only imagine what you all have been through. Obviously I've lost a lot of close friends through this, but it's never the same as family. So I just really want to thank you guys again for sharing your stories and just how much it means to me. And I basically my old dream job was to be um kind of like a clinical psychologist working with not just the patient, but their entire family as a unit, speaking with their loved ones, significant others. I know that my girlfriend Jessie, who has been on the show before, we've been together a year and a half. She's sleeping in the room next door because she just got back from Costa Rica. And so she's just getting, used to being out of the rainforest. So she, I think it's very important to support the significant others as well. And I feel like it's always so patient focused. And I'm so glad that there's this group here who are really trying to make a difference and move it to the surrounding community, not just the individual. So I think that is absolutely incredible. So Dr. Kuo, this next question is for you as, as a researcher, as someone, on the medical side, what can people or siblings do while their person that they care about is in treatment and after treatment for support? What are resources they can go to? And as a provider and a researcher, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I have to say I think one thing that sort of is lacking, and I think the field is growing a little bit more now, is sort of the psychosocial support, especially for siblings of children with cancer. And obviously when a patient comes and get diagnosed, the focus should, and reasonably so, should be on that patient to try to focus on how to get them better. But I think one thing that often is neglected is that the sibling is a huge component of them getting better, right? Like the siblings are going to be the main day-to-day supporter, getting them through chemo, sort of being the one voice of reason, because when the patient gets diagnosed, there's a lot of emotions that are that they go through, and sometimes the easy target becomes the parents, right? So they don't listen to the parents, and oftentimes the siblings have to come in and sort of like talk to them. So I think that part, unfortunately, is sort of the most neglected part. And in terms of support, I think several organizations have sort of put out certain guidelines of interventions and how to screen. I think NCCN has, the National Comprehensive Cancer Network has like some published guidelines for support, but not a lot of it, I think, is really solely focused on sibling. It's mostly like caregivers. And so I think that's one thing that we as a community can do better on. At least from my point, when I'm on service and when I'm seeing patients either newly diagnosed or patients that come in that are undergoing treatment with their siblings, I always make it a point to address them, to sort of give them the same level of attention, to say hi to them, remember their names, also asking them like what are they doing now, and I try to also encourage them to have a sense of like normal routine as well, so that they don't lose that thread, because that's also really important to have some sort of routine to be back in school, because everything is so disruptive once your sibling is diagnosed with cancer, right? You're basically in limbo for the duration of the treatment.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think it's so important to touch on all of these things. And it's again, as an only child, I can only imagine everything that all of you have been through. And it's just, I'm glad that there are programs out there, and I'm so glad that the narrative, I feel like, is the wrong word, but the focus is starting to shift a little bit. It's starting to broaden, and just hearing that makes me so happy, because it really does need to be done. And I'm so glad that there is the work that's being done. There are programs out there. So tying to that, Matt and Valerie, I have a question for you. Valerie, we can start with you. What activities, programs, or self-care practices have really helped you the most through your siblings' diagnosis and treatment leading into where you are today? Like, are there any like patterns of thinking that you've adopted, or, you know, has it been more therapeutic for you going through certain programs or certain educational kind of programs, things like that? What has really helped you the most in your opinion, and what can be done better?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. I think on the day-to-day basis, I think as we all talked about psychological support, whether it's like counseling or like getting a therapist, I think is important. But the caveat I think doesn't get talked about is when you're ready, because I think like a lot of times like that gets shoved down people's throats and like they're not at the point to like talk about it, but just always have that door open so when they feel like it can be. And I think on top of that, what helped me during my sister's treatment was so there was like the camp I mentioned earlier. It was like a 1 week residential camp where I like was sent off for a week for a camp with other siblings, and it was like middle of nowhere. Like I really didn't want to go, but my parents made me. And I was like, great, it's like cancer camp, middle of nowhere. And I remember going and loving it. Like it's been 10 years since I went, and I still go back, and I'm actually a counselor for it now. And I thought that was really helpful because at camp, like everyone else was a sibling too, even the counselors. So like there was always someone there to talk to if you wanted to, but also it wasn't like, oh, you have to talk about it. It was just in a pretty gentle way where we would have like activities and classes and all that stuff during the day to keep us busy. But when it was like rest time, there would be like light conversations to bring up and you could continue it. But you also didn't have to. And for bereaved siblings, there was like called chat room B, where like if you have a bereaved sibling, you could go to that. But again, like you don't have to. So having like again the door open, but not like forcing it, I thought was really helpful, and just having a space where people understood, the support was just so meaningful to me, because even when my sister passed, like people would drive up 2-3 hours to my sister's funeral, even though it was like out of the way for them on a weekday. So I just say that like feeling of support was just unbeatable. And I think on the day-to-day for support and just like self-care practices, I personally journal. So like when I feel like I can't talk to my therapist that one, like our scheduled session once a week, or I like, or I wasn't ready yet. Like I would just write down my thoughts, and like it would just serve as an outlet for me. And also as like a growing point, because I could like kind of reflect back on what I was thinking, like, and also like my thinking patterns of how I process things, of how I felt in that moment, and seeing how I've grown since then. So that was helpful. And also I think having like really close friends that like treated me like I was normal, and like would still include me in activities even if like my sibling was sick, or like I wasn't the center of attention, so making sure I wasn't forgotten. And like for me, like my hobbies are like cooking and art, so I just used that to maintain a sense of normalcy throughout and after my sister's treatment.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I feel like maintaining that sense of normalcy um, for everyone involved is so crucial for just overall mental well-being. So no one ends up fighting like my cats are currently. And it's very important to feel that support. I took an incredible class when I was at the University of Washington, called the Psychology of Happiness, and essentially the purpose of the course, there's obviously no cut and dry, clear cut answer. But what is happiness? And at the end of the day, after, our 10 weeks of research and going over materials and having discussion groups, um, the answer essentially was social support and maintaining a sense of normalcy, even in the chaotic. A super random and weird example. My mom made sure we have a family friend whose mom unfortunately passed away from brain cancer that had also metastasized to her lungs. Um, and so this was, obviously, kind of during lockdown periods, during the pandemic. Obviously, when you're neutropenic, when you're in treatment, you have to be extra careful. Our family friend understood this, and she owned a nail salon. And so she would come to our house and do my mom and I's nails every 2 weeks. We'd do it outside, we'd be masked up. That's the beauty of living in LA, that we can do it outside most of the time. Um, and kind of maintaining that even just random sense of normalcy, like, okay, my hair's gone, I can't leave the house, I'm essentially bubble boy, but you know, I'm I'm just home, but my nails look good, you know. So it's those little random positivity boosts that I think really make the difference, and the social support in any capacity, whether that be a family friend bringing you food every other week, or there's so many different ways that it can be approached. So yeah, thank you. And Matt, same question for you.
Yeah, I'll totally echo what Valerie says about journaling. I think that, while my brother was going through treatment, um, it was definitely like I could not talk about it at all. Like, not with my parents, not with my friends. I refused to do therapy. But I think that, you know, post treatment, and having matured a little bit, I still therapy is still very difficult for me, but I will say that like writing down my thoughts, and just being able to get them out in any kind of ways has been so important for me. I think that that's one of the real places that issues like mentally can stem from after this, is just not being able to process your trauma. And I think just being able to write down my thoughts on a page and being able to look back at how I thought about things before and look at how I'm thinking about things today, I think is one of the real like strengths of journaling, like being able to look back and see the progression of your thoughts and, seeing how you've kind of gone through an evolution in terms of your thinking about certain issues. So I think that's super important. I'll also say another thing is that it's very easy to kind of get swept up into this totally, especially if you're a sibling and kind of lose your sense of self a little bit. So I think something that's super important is being able to clearly define what your goals are in life, what makes you happy, what you enjoy doing. You don't have to write that down, but I think just having like a conception of this is what I want my life to look like, especially because when a sibling's going through treatment, I'm not going to lie, like your parents are just going to be totally, concerned with that. Like, I mean, my parents, and I don't fault them for this at all, but it's like I didn't really get much interaction with my parents, when my brother was going through treatment. And I think they were doing the right thing, focusing on what the most important thing was at the time. But I will say that it's very important to have that like very clear sense of self because you're not always going to get that from the people around you, especially when you're going through such a huge, like life shattering, life changing event like this. So I will say those are two things, just having a clear set, defined goals and also being able to, write down my thoughts. And one other thing I'll say is, and this is kind of be seen now, I guess, how I'm a DJ now, I guess, but something that really helped me was just like listening to music. I mean, you know, I feel like this point in my life where my brother was going through treatment, music was really something I was able to lean on, just, put my earbuds in, put my headphones on and just like listen to music for like hours on end really helped me to like, it was just super therapeutic for me. And I think everybody just finding something that they can do that doesn't take a lot of effort that they can just do and enjoy is like very, very important. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And to go off of what you're saying, I think a lot of people aren't sure how to help. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that you don't necessarily have to go the medical route to make a difference. Like you want to potentially raise awareness within the law community about people's different medical situations and things like that. And I think that that's extremely powerful. And I know Dr. Kuo, you're at UCSD when you were, majoring in dance at the time. Like, I feel like that's such a beautiful way to express what you're going through, almost akin to journaling, but in a physical form. And Matt, like you were saying, relying on music. We did have our music episode a while back, about songs that kind of made us think of our situations or things like that. Unfortunately, due to copyright issues, we could only play 4 seconds of each song, which really didn't make it that impactful. But hopefully I think what we could do going forward is potentially make like a master doc essentially and just have a bunch of links. I can even do that myself. That'd be something that I would love to do within MIB community and beyond, is just have a list of or almost like a playlist essentially of songs that make us feel. I have a whole playlist called songs that make me feel something that resembles joy, or songs that make me feel anything. You know what I mean? Like it's those things to kind of get you up and out of your head.
Would love
Dr.
that. I
Kuo,
would love to be, if you need help with that, let me know because I would love that. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, no, we'll def collab on that. I'll get a feat. Anyway, Dr. Kuo is going into your dance background because I feel like that makes you so unique as a medical professional. And I'm someone who loves dance and who loves music. I was always a terrible dancer, but I think it's one of my favorite forms of art to consume. Was there a piece that you got to choreograph or a piece that you were a part of that really stuck with you and kind of was cathartic for you throughout this process while you were in school?
So I started actually uh uh breakdancing when I was like in middle school. And then it just became like super cathartic because I started entering competitions and then started sort of there's a thing called cypher where you're in a circle and you sort of just go in and dance with other people. And the community is so tight knit that it was basically like an outlet for me. So um, and then I got into sort of contemporary dance in high school, and then that was what essentially was at UCSD was like contemporary dance major. Um, and on this side, I still sort of was doing breaking and essentially was doing that a lot, and that sort of became my major focus. Was doing that with I had a crew here in Southern California, and I would meet up with them to practice and dance and stuff. So it was very very much cathartic and very much essentially my only outlet. Similar to journaling for Valerie, music for Matt. It was just something that was I felt like the only thing that I could channel my sort of resentment and my emotions through that nothing else that I could do would. So
No, thank you. I think it also is that sense of routine too. Like you feel like you have this outside community that's not connected. It's part of your life, and it's something that is yours individually with this group. And I think it's I feel like with the discussions we've been having today, that is so important for just the mental well-being of everyone involved. I mean, it's just when you have that group supporting you and you feel like you have this outlet all in one, I feel like there's nothing more powerful than that. And I think that it's absolutely beautiful. And I think the combination of breaking and contemporary actually goes together way, way more than most people would think. And again, this is just, I'm dating a dancer who used to be a dancer, and I watch So You Think You Can Dance. So again, I'm just, a consumer, not an actual artist in any way, shape, or form. But I just think that is a really beautiful way. For you to find that sense of calm and also excitement at the same time. That's a more positive form of excitement rather than the nervous energy that goes into caregiving and that sort of thing.
yeah, and I think it definitely has to do with like identity. Like Matt was saying, I think it was something that was siloed off where it was just like my own thing. And I knew that once I sort of step away and do this thing, it really is like for myself. Um, so yeah, I mean, going back to your question, I don't think there was ever like a piece that it was just like every time I like go and meet up with my crew that it was just like a sense of like family and joy that really was able to sort of pull me away a little bit from the reality of all this like cancer and diagnosis and treatment and stuff.
Yeah, speaking about your sibling, Dr. Kuo, what inspired you to share your story from the sibling perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I echoing to what you were saying, with cultural sort of effects in terms of like how families deal with cancer diagnosis differently. I underwent sort of the similar thing I'm Taiwanese, right? So obviously in an Asian household, like expressing feeling is not like the thing. You sort of like express it through like actions. And so as I grow older, I'm starting more and more realizing that like that is just not how I would like to raise my family. I really want to embrace love, express love whenever I can. And I think that came after actually Stanley passed away. Um, I think right when he passed away, he told me that he loved me, and I think that was the first time ever, like anybody in the family has ever like expressed that in words, and that was very powerful, and so I decided to share. It's actually been in my mind for a long time now to try to write something um, about how I dealt with it. And I think in a way I wanted it to be out there so that other people can echo and resonate with the piece. Um, and the other layer of that is selfishly, there was the graffiti artist Banksy. I think he had he had a quote saying that you die twice. I think once when you stop breathing, the second time when somebody says your name for the last time. And I really like that quote really for some reason stuck with me. And so ever since I've like sort of like have that quote, I've been meaning to in a way immortalize both my siblings um, who published sort of like like manuscripts because at every single thing that I do that's related to Stanley or Sammy or what have you, I'll always put in the very bottom in an acknowledgement section saying in loving memory of Stanley or Sammy Kuo. And I think that is sort of my selfish way of forcing somebody else to read out their name so that they're not exactly passed away yet. So I think that was another layer of it where I was like, I wanted to put out a piece really to help others out there, other siblings of children with cancer, but also in a way to remind myself selfishly that I'm still doing something, that I'm still pushing the needle forward, and reminding myself that I have a promise to fulfill. Um, so that's sort of multi-layered.
In my opinion, I wouldn't refer to that as selfish. I would view that as a gift to the world that they are continuing the, you know, just continuing on the legacy of Stanley. And I think that it's incredible that you're doing that. And, we've seen it even in protests today. It's like everyone's saying, say their name. And I think that it's so important to keep memories alive, to keep change coming and to kind of keep that drive in everyone. And I think that it's a really beautiful thing that you've done. And it's a very cliche saying, and I know it's big in the 2020s, that self-care is not selfish. And I feel like you bringing their names into more of the mainstream and just continuing to honor them and to say their names, I just think it's a form of self-care and it's a gift to the world. So self-care is not selfish, and what you are doing is absolutely incredible. And I know it means a lot to all of us who are here. So thank you.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
okay, so this is for everybody. Matt, we'll start with you. Um, what do you think others can do to help support the siblings of people with cancer as a young adult or as, an adolescent, and make them feel seen throughout their loved one's cancer experience? What do you think are not necessarily concrete examples, but just almost like some easy intro steps to kind of help support? Where would you recommend, like, someone whose sibling was just diagnosed, like how would you recommend that you make them that sibling finds ways to feel seen?
For sure. I think that a really big thing and kind of something that ties into what everybody's been saying here today is, you know, making that sibling feel like they can be emotionally vulnerable with you as a friend, as a supporter. I think that for me, being like a high schooler when my brother was going through treatment, um, also being like a guy, it's oftentimes like, you're not supposed to really like, talk about your emotions, I guess. Like just men in general, I feel like aren't really encouraged to talk about their emotions. And I think that that definitely leaches into like younger men as well. But having grown up a little bit, like I can definitely talk with my friends about my emotions now, and it makes me just feel so much better about, the situation, and just looking back on it, just be able to look back on it with almost a little bit more of a positive hue, and I think that that's just really important for yourself also, to be able to be vulnerable about your feelings, be able to feel them. I think that's a big thing, just being able to feel how you feel and not really feel ashamed about it. And I think a good way to do that is to just be emotionally vulnerable yourself with those siblings, and I think that can really help to open them up to also share their experiences, share how they're feeling. Because I think that was the most difficult part for me, was just being able to manage my emotions and how I felt about things. And it's extremely difficult when you can't really talk about it with anybody. So I think that that's just super important, is being able to make those siblings feel like they can be emotionally open and emotionally vulnerable with you as a friend. Yeah.
That's a great place to start, and just making sure people feel heard, I feel like, is not only heard but seen as well. I think that is crucially important. Uh, Valerie, any input on this question as well?
Yeah, I want to echo Matt and just like being seen and being included. So like I know a lot of times people would ask me like, how are your parents? How are like your sister? But they would never ask how I am, like when I'm physically standing in front of them. So I feel like it can be like just something small like that. Because you might be the only person asking them that. So like I think that's important. And also like if you don't like exclude them out of day to day, or just count them out because it's, oh well, Matt might be in the hospital with his sibling, or like some, like count them out of activities automatically without being like, I think people still appreciate the invite, even if like the answer might most likely be no. So just to know like they aren't forgotten in that way. And I think even the years after, like on angelversaries or like birthdays or something, just to check up on people, because I feel like immediately it's like you get all the support, all the flowers and stuff get sent to your house, and like that's when it just makes the most sense to support people. But I think like the years after are also hard too, so not forgetting to check in on those days. So I think that's some ways people can support.
No, thank you for sharing your viewpoint on that. I completely agree with you. I feel like I like to check in with the people that I care about, who and their support systems. Like, one of my close friends passed away from rhabdomyosarcoma in February. She was a very close friend of mine. I'd known her since she was 13 and I was 18. I was freshly diagnosed, and so was she. So it was very hard losing her back in February. And yesterday, it was basically one of her best friends since birth, who's actually closer to my age. And but they were practically as close to siblings as you can get without actually being blood related. And we talked on the phone for 45 minutes about how grief is never linear. And yes, it's only been, it'll be 5 months tomorrow since she passed. Her name is Erin, and it's been 5 months since she passed, and it's just so important to check in. And it was her just calling me out of the blue to check in on me, and it's not like we were even that close. Me and Grayson, her friend, the friend that called me. It's not even like we were that close beforehand, but it meant so much to me as someone who was kind of like Aaron's de facto sister in treatment. We both had the same oncologist. We would hang out together all the time. My girlfriend was at USC when she was at USC, so they got to bond and know each other as well. And so I think it was just, those are the kind of things on the random days, because it's true that grief is not linear and it doesn't follow, the calendar like we do. Um, so I think it's really great that, you know, you're expressing the need for people to give support, not necessarily on the important days, but just always and sporadically. I feel like that makes it much more meaningful. Dr. Kuo, Any input on this question?
Yeah, I think from what I've experienced, I think the one most important thing is don't there's a reason why we're called the forgotten children, right, of cancer. And I think it's important to acknowledge when we're there in the visits, to ask about how we're actually doing, and ask about our goals, like what the siblings' goals are and how that pursuit is going. If they're in school, ask how they're doing in school, and ask what are their dreams. I think those exactly the same questions that you would ask the patient that actually has cancer. I think it's the same set of questions that you should also ask the siblings, because I think they're undergoing same thing in parallel, despite different experiences. And I think it's hard because at you know this whole journey is different. Siblings are in different ages. There's some that are teenagers, some are adolescents, young adults, and so different stages of sort of like mental maturity and different stages of what they want, right? And so for the siblings that are more older and more sort of in the young adolescent stage, they might not want to be shoved resources. They might not want to be told to do like what to do, right? But I think it would be much appreciated if they're acknowledged and that the resources are there for them. Like Matt was saying, I think um, you know you're gonna approach those resources when you're ready, but it's nice to know that there's stuff there. And I think it's important to be like, hey, here are some of the things for you. You don't have to just take a look at it, you don't have to say anything about it, but here are some of the resources. And I think for the younger ones, I think it's just important that they're included. I think it's really important that they know that they're loved by the people around them, and cared for as well. And sort of, it's hard, but to sort of equally have that same level of attention, because they're probably not getting that from their parents, right? And they're either seeking that from their friends or somewhere else. And I think that's really important for the community to sort of know, and not always like hyper focus on the patient.
I'll say one other thing I wanted to add was this is kind of a little funny thing, but it means a lot, I will say, when someone just asks you like, do you need a hug? I think that's, I really started to appreciate the value of just like a good hug over the past, couple years or so. I remember I was walking to work like a month ago, and this like random guy that I was walking past on the sidewalk, he was like, "You need a hug, man?" And I was like, "Yeah." And we just like hugged it out for like 5 seconds. And, you know, like that can mean a lot. I think just asking someone like, "Do you need a hug?" No one's gonna say, "Oh, I need a hug right now." But I think just asking, like, that can mean a lot to somebody. So that's just something else people can do. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I mean, everyone has their own love languages, and I feel like love languages are focused on more when it comes to romantic relationships, but it's, I think, in my opinion, equally as important as familial relations and platonic relationships. Just kind of knowing what how that person receives love in the best form possible. And I feel like you really have to know someone to get to that point. But I feel like if you're just like an intuitive person, like the person who saw you on the street and was like, that guy needs a hug, like, like it's just that almost human instinct of kindness, which I feel like can be wiped out so easily by the craziness of today's world and the traumas that we all experience. But I think it's such a beautiful thing that it happened to you, and that someone acknowledged that you were a person in need, and you were made to be special in that moment. And I think that that's really important. And I know that for some people it'll be words of affirmation like, hey, you don't have to respond to this if you're not in a good headspace, but I just want you to know that I'm really proud of how you're handling everything, and I'm here to talk if you'd like to. Or also, this is what I've been doing with people lately too, is I can also just send you memes or pictures of cute animals. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's different levels. It just depends on how the person receiving the support, how much support they want or need in that moment, and how much they want to engage. So I feel like when you have multiple options, like I feel like asking a question is always helpful, or just sending a stupid meme or just whatever. Like it just those little bits of human connection make us feel whole. Um, and so I think that is crucial. And again, this is from an outsider's perspective as someone who has osteo and who is an only child. But I just think that the three of you are doing such incredible things in all of your unique ways to better the world and to continue on the legacy and to really step into your own, because it's your story. It is not theirs. It is yours just as much. And so I think it's so beautiful the way that you guys have been sharing your experiences and moving forward. And I know grief is not linear, and this is never an easy topic. But you all are such great people that you are sharing so much, and that it makes such a difference in the community. So I really just want to thank you again. And I think let's end with something both that might be heavy and lighthearted at the same time. So I'm going to ask each of you to share one of your favorite short, funny stories with your sibling, or Dr. Kuo, both of your siblings. If there's like a funny, silly moment that you would like to kind of remember, and if you guys want to take a minute for that, that's okay too. Um, but I feel like that might be a nice way to cap off the podcast today. So, whoever wants to go first, just unmute yourself when you're ready.
Okay, I'll start because okay, this came right to my head. Um, so obviously when my brother was diagnosed, he was really young. And I remember my parents. He was a big fan of like Marvel movies, like he loved superheroes and stuff like that. And I remember the Deadpool movie came out, and my parents were like, "No way! Like, we're not gonna let you guys see that. Like, that's just no way." It was like rated R. We were like, "Oh no, this is like, they're never gonna let us watch this." And I remember one time my parents had left for to do something, so it was just me and my brother at the house, and I pirated the movie, and me and my brother watched it together. And I remember one time he like let slip that we watched the movie like to my parents. And I don't know, it was just so funny because it was like we were just trying to hide it for like weeks. And then he like said something that they were like, "Oh, you guys watch that for sure." And they weren't even mad, but it was just like, I don't know, it was just such a funny thing to me.
No, it's a great camaraderie moment for sure, and great timing. This is the July episode, and Deadpool and Wolverine is coming out at the end of this month, and I know I'm definitely going to go and see it because the Deadpool
Yeah,
movies are
me
also some of my favorites. I'm also a Marvel nerd,
too.
so I relate to that. Uh, yeah.
I think mine was at the beginning. So when my sister first got her diagnosis, we've always like wanted a dog as a kid. And my parents have always said no because they're like it's impractical. Like who's gonna take care of it? Like you guys aren't, so it's gonna be us. And especially when your kid gets cancer, like there's already so much going on, so like you don't want to add to the chaos. But then like my sister's the type to never pull her cancer card unless it like she's not that type. But this is the one time like she like made a whole presentation. She made my parents sit down, made a whole like, a presentation of why we need to get a dog. And then the last like selling point was I have cancer. And so like that like for some reason sold them. And so I remember going to the adoption shelter with her, and we were like stalking all these dogs. We wanted like there was a lot of requirements for this dog, right? It could not shed because my parents did not want to clean it up. It had to be small enough and not that big. And I remember going to the shelter because we just had seen them upload this little dog, the Shih Tzu, and we came like we're in between two dogs, a Shih Tzu and a Golden Doodle, because those two like don't shed. And like the Golden Doodle was just more enthusiastic, happy, and then my parent and we wanted her. Her name was Princess. I still remember. And my sister but sadly like someone filled out the paperwork earlier, so they got her. So then we ended up getting my dog Oreo. Like his name was Shade at the time, but my sister renamed him to Oreo because he's black and white, and she's like, so it was just a cuter name. But he had peed on himself. He was like really like a wet rat in the small corner, and my sister was like, I guess we'll take this one. But we ended up like really loving him. He's still in our family. So it's just a funny story of how like my sister like made my parents go a whole 180 to get a dog as for her emotional support. But I think it ended up being everyone's else's emotional support. And we took that dog with us, like sneak we snuck him into the hospital, and like my mom put him in like this bag and said she was breastfeeding, and that was just like obviously not true because my sister's like this whole 13-year-old. So like we'd sneak him in the hospital, and even when she was like out getting being transferred from NIH to Hopkins for surgery, our oncologist coordinated it, so like she could the truck the little like ambulance could stop by to like so she could pet him on the way to the hospital. So yeah.
That is absolutely amazing. And let me just say, there's a reason that there are 5 cats in this room. I was diagnosed in September of 2018. And back then we had 3 cats, one of whom has since passed away from the old age of 19. And for an Abyssinian, that's very old. So Bingo was alive and kicking for way longer than we thought he would be. He was a great cat. But if you're doing the math, that's 2 that are alive since 2018. So we have been up 3 cats and 1 dog since I was diagnosed. So I definitely I definitely understand the pet perspective on that. And my mom was, my grandpa had said to my mom that she was crazy that we had this many pets. And my mom's like, no one's ever gonna marry me again. She's like, I'm like, no, what you gotta do is your daughter who has cancer lives with you. You had 2 cats and she has 3. This is what you have to say. Put that on your Hinge profile. I don't care. But yeah, so I definitely understand that. Yeah, so I think, yeah, I have 3 cats under the age of 4 right now. So it's been 6 years almost since I was diagnosed. So that's definitely a sizable number. So Dr. Kuo, we'll end with you.
So when Stanley was sort of near end of life, he was making sort of like a wish list of like a bucket list. And so for us to complete eventually when he passed, I would sort of try my best to complete them. And one of them was bungee jumping. And I'm like definitely afraid of heights. And so I actually volunteered during the 2 years off before medical school, I volunteered in Africa, in Tanzania. And I was able to go to this to basically bungee jump into the Nile River. And it was like the worst decision I've ever done. And I was so scared and I thought I was gonna die. The setup was not safe at all, but I did it. And then I'm like still looking down the list and there's all these like, watch what is it, Twilight, the whole series. Like, not into that, but I'll do it. It's just like all these things that are a little bit ridiculous. So I think it's like a funny thing.
Well, I love that you did that for him, and facing our greatest fears. And I feel like my mom and I kind of have the same. We go back and forth with each other if we're freaked out about something. We'll look at each other and go, it's really scary. It's really scary. Cancer. It'll just and it kind of puts everything into perspective. And I feel like when you have that emotional connection, it just makes you face even your craziest fears. And so I think that it is absolutely awesome that you did that. And an experience I'm sure that you will never forget. So yeah, I guess that's all for us today. And I just want to thank you all so much. I know that this may not always be the easiest conversation, but you are keeping the legacies alive. And thank you so much, so much for sharing today. It absolutely means the world to all of us. So for everyone, Thank you for tuning in to OsteAo, the Osteosarcoma podcast. Be sure to follow MIB Agents on social media at the links in the description for all of the intel and hot goss. A special thank you to Dr. Kuo, Matt, and Valerie for joining us today. I'm your host, Mia, and on the count of 3, we will say that's the T. 1, 2, 3. That's the
That's the
T.
T.